All right, everybody, this is Duncan Foord.
Thank you, Eric. Eric has changed his outfit to introduce me. He was wearing a suit before. I'm not sure what to read into that. Thank you for staying. Although I do understand some of you may be here unwillingly. Eric said that someone had been sent downstairs to round people up. So I guess somebody was trying to leave and has been forced back here, and I'm now in the... Is that the case with anybody? Were you rounded up when you were actually hoping to leave? No? You want to be here, really? I feel I should be offering something better. Sex, drugs, rock and roll. If I said I could do 2 of those, would you believe me? We'll try and do 2, okay? The first thing I'd like you to do is help me, because you are quite spread out and not many. And also I'd like to get you talking a bit more, and also talking to some different people. Can you put up your hand if you're local, if you're from here or this area? Or you live here and from this area. So that is about half, isn't it? Hands up if you're not, if you've come from somewhere else, like Scotland or America. Yeah, that's about 50-50, isn't it? Okay. So what I want you to do is 2 things. I want you to find someone who you haven't been sitting with or working with, who is one of those 2 groups, yeah? So one person from here work with someone who's come, a guest, yeah? And also if you happen to be in that pair, you have to find a new pair. And the third criteria is if you're both wearing similarly striped clothing or polka dot patterns, you must also separate, because that just looks not very good. It's better if you're sitting next to someone with more different clothes. So, and the third thing is, can you all go in the middle block? There you go. I am demanding, but that's all we can do at this time. Otherwise, sorry, hands up again, the people are from here. There you go. Keep your hands up and talk and move. You can be in a group of 3 if you want, with a 2 and a 1, if it works better that way. There we go. You can make a 3. You can make a 3 if you want, 2 and a 1. If you can't find a partner, you can make a 3. Like herding cats, isn't it? You're from here, yes? Well, you can do 3 maybe, or well, 2, that's fine. Okay, has everybody got someone? Oh. No sex, drugs, or rock and roll so far. Okay, so you can get to know the person you're working with by talking about those images, see what you make of them, the title of the talk. Just chat about that for about 1 minute, 45 seconds, okay? Okay, that will do. Thank you. Do you know the name of the person you're working with, by the way? Does everyone know the name of the people in their group? You sure? If not, I might test you. What are their names, Chris? Wow, fantastic. You guys are good. All right. I'm from the company I work in is called Oxford TEFL. We do teacher training courses and language courses. We have quite a big school in Barcelona and a small one in Prague, where we run Trinity Diploma courses, CELTA courses, and we have a language center for language teaching, business English, adults, kids, all that kind of stuff. I'm now the director of those schools or that company, so my approach to teacher development comes from being a director of a school, working in teacher training, working with directors of studies who are working with teachers, and my own experience as a teacher and a director of studies in the past. That's kind of the background to me. So we're going to have a bit of tennis in this as well. Did anyone have any speculations about why there's a picture of tennis in there? Hey? Wimbledon? Yeah, I mean, yeah, it kind of links to the idea. I use the metaphor of, I kind of got a bit fascinated watching my daughter having tennis lessons and how the trainer, the coach worked. He's called a coach, isn't he? When you learn tennis, he's a coach, but when you learn English, it's called a teacher. Not sure why, but it is. Anyway, I kind of got fascinated about that because it seems to be very simple and straightforward, and I get the feeling that what we do is quite complicated, maybe unnecessarily. So that's the kind of metaphor. Yeah, this ball has got words associated with coaching. I should be clear as well. Sorry, guys, can you come over in this bit here and make a group of 3? Okay. So everyone's in that bit. You could make a group of 3, come and sit here or there. Oh, thank you. Where was I? Yeah. So things could be a bit complicated. So there's a metaphor of coaching, yeah. Yeah, the coach seems to kind of have it easier. Yeah, what I was going to say is I'm not a coach. I'm not a professional coach. I haven't done a course in coaching. So I'm using the word coaching approach and coaching to describe what I think is an approach, a series of tools, activities, things I've picked up, noticed, used, read about. But I'm not a qualified life coach or tennis coach or anything coach. Just in case. Some people get a bit annoyed about that. They go, we can't use the word coaching unless you're actually a proper coach. Well, obviously. But I have written 2 books which kind of feed into this talk as well. One was in 2009 called The Developing Teacher. So that's obviously about teacher development. And the other one is written with Dan Barber called From English Teacher to Learner Coach, which is a book for teachers and talks about the approach in the classroom. And I started thinking, well, why leave it at that? Maybe this approach that we kind of describe in that book, where a teacher thinks of themselves more as a coach for their students and less of a teacher, maybe that could apply to teacher development as well. Why are we acting different with our students than we act with ourselves or each other? Yeah? Are these schemes, for example, the kind of thing that Chris was talking about, that are common in schools, do they match the way teachers, are they kind of a mirror, or do they reflect the way teachers behave with students? I'm not sure they do. Maybe they could. Maybe it's not so complicated. Yeah, Carter USM. Does anyone know them? Early 90s band? I bet nobody does. Yeah, I thought one person would. Do you know what the USM stands for? Unstoppable Sex Machine. I told you we'd have sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We've now got the sex. They were famous for having smart aleck lyrics, one of which was, if love is the answer, what was the question? I'll rewrap that and say, if teacher development, or CPD, which we learned was continual or continuous professional development, is the answer, what was the question, or what could the question be? Can you discuss that in your group? If CPD is the answer, what's the question? Some ideas. Anyone want to volunteer? Nice. Okay. Worth thinking about, isn't it? Because I think sometimes we mean different things, and Chris was talking about bottom down and top up, and it may mean different things to different people. As you say, sorry, what's your name? Dave said, for some teachers, it is a pain in the arse. It's extra stress. It's outside the comfort zone, but not in a good way. It's an obligation, a scheme, an imposition. For a school or organization, it may be a means of quality control. I think we should come clean about this and call things what they are. And I think if we're observing teachers to see if they're good enough to work in our school, we should call that quality control, or observing to see if you're good enough. And stop pussyfooting around and call it developmental observations or all that sort of bullshit. But if it's the other thing, like making the teacher's job easier, other things, then call it that, teacher development. The other thing we might distinguish is teacher development and professional development, which, teacher development might be getting better in the classroom, or just spending less time preparing, or not feeling stressed, but actually not being any better at all for your students. That's, to me, development as well. Development doesn't have to impact on the student. It could impact just on the teacher. Professional development, I understand to be a bit more my career or the different things I do, the activities I want to pursue. Yeah? Do I want to become a teacher trainer? Do I want to do a young learner class? Do I want to become a DOS? That kind of thing. Okay, so it's started to sort that out. Next slide. Right. Yeah. Believe it or not, do you know this guy, Ivan Lendl? Nobody knows him. The same person who knows Carter, the unstoppable. Do you think it could be an age thing? Okay, so there's no one in here as old as me. Oh, Jesus. You don't know who Ivan Lendl is? Yeah, come on. Czech people know, don't they? Believe it or not, this guy, he's about the same age as me, and this was my first kind of man crush. Which is ridiculous. You'd think that man crush is obvious. Everyone has man crushes, don't they, at some point? But why him? He just doesn't look like the headgear doesn't help, but I think he's trying to distract us from the fact he's probably the least sexiest man in sport ever. Later he became Andy Murray's trainer. I don't know if you, anyway. This is what he said, which I quite like. He said, don't mistake activity for achievement. Practice the right way. I only play well when I'm prepared. If I don't practice the way I should, then I won't play the way that I know I can. He did become a tennis coach, which is kind of the same for teachers, I think. So he's kind of half the story to me. And as someone said yesterday, there's been a lot of there was a sort of famous quote, I think it was attributed to Jeremy Harmer, but I'm not sure. But it's a kind of myth or a apocryphal quote in ELT, which says something like, it's not the same having 10 years experience as 1 year experience repeated 10 times. Have you ever come across that? Or variations of that? And people nod like you're nodding now, going, yes, of course, because there are these teachers who do the same thing every year for 10 years. And there are these other teachers who change it every time. And they're developing teachers, and the other ones are these kind of stuck in the muds who the director of studies is always complaining about. And they're not proper teachers. They're not developing teachers. I don't buy that at all. I think if you've been teaching for 10 years, if you've been playing tennis for 10 years, you're a better tennis player. You think Lendl got worse when he practiced? Now, you might argue that with getting some feedback and reflection, you could enhance that, and I'm sure he did. He got a trainer, and he got some feedback. But basically, you put in the hours, don't you? That's how you get good. However, that's not the whole story, I don't think. This is Hannah Mandlikova. This was my girl crush. I had a boy crush and a girl crush at that time. You might also say that it wasn't perhaps the most obvious choice. Chris Evert was around at the time. Hannah Mandlikova. I'm not sure you can read that. I have to do everything with my heart, laugh, talk, make love, or play tennis. Oh, look, we've got more sex now. That's twice. And I think this speaks to maybe the story, I think it was Susan talking about teacher, your French teacher, is that right? The French teacher and the German teacher. Can you remember the stories of the French teacher and the German teacher? What was the difference between them? Yeah, one was what Hannah's talking about here, I think. Maybe this teacher was doing it with her heart, and the other one wasn't. And that's a huge thing, and we know that happens, don't we? Untrained teachers, people without much experience, or people somehow put that stuff into it. So it's not just the practice, there's the heart. I don't think we do much of that in workshops. When was the last workshop called Engaging with Your Heart, or helping the students to see that? But I think she's right, and that's about it, isn't it? Then there's two things. You've got to practice a lot, and then somehow discover your heart. Because that's what's going to keep you going. That's what's going to stop the burnout. You could practice and practice and practice and get better, but you'll just get pissed off, like Dorothy was saying, and burnt out, even if you're getting better. Unless you kind of actually enjoy doing it. I mean, quick question, hands up, how many of you have ever thought of leaving teaching and doing something else instead? Go on, be honest. That is a lot of people, and this is a conference of keen people. Imagine the millions, I don't know, Michael knows how many teachers there are in the world, 50 billion or something? 15 billion. Imagine how many of them have thought of not being a teacher even. That's where teacher development starts. Am I going to bother to carry on doing this or not? And I think you have to discover that. That's why you need the heart, otherwise it's kind of, you're not going to get there. So that's kind of an introduction to the coaching approach. It's kind of in line with what Chris was saying, similar, I think. I see it as having three elements. It's teacher-driven and not scheme-driven. So it's really not about what the British Council requirement or what the equals requirement is for the number of hours. It's about the teacher deciding what they do. I'm not saying the two things can't work together, but that's what I understand by a coaching approach. That you think about the individual. It's basically a human approach, as opposed to a kind of machine one or an industrial one. Come back to that in a minute on the next slide. It's goal-based, not activity-based. Well, that's kind of, I think Chris mentioned that idea, that what's the point of just, that's the Van Lindel quote as well, isn't it? What's the point of going to work, saying you've been to a workshop if it hasn't had any impact on you or your students? This comes to, there's a sort of, almost a parody of this happens in the country where I work mostly, which is Spain, and still happens. The system in Spain for state school teachers is if they attend conferences and get that accredited, i.e. they go to the tutor afterwards and they get a signature. So they've been to lots of workshops, so they've been to a conference, they can actually get more pay. They can get increments in their pay just for attending. So the motivators are set, that's activity-based. There's no evidence that sometimes they don't even go to the session, they just come at the end and get the signature. That's an extreme example, but a lot of teacher development kind of stuff is like that, I think. It's about, and some of the scheme-based stuff, for example, equals will require your teachers to attend so many hours of development activity, assuming that something has happened, but it might not have. And the third thing is that it's motivation-focused, not compliance-focused, which maybe isn't a third thing, but that's kind of linked to it, I think. So I'm doing this because I want to do it, because I want to get better at it, or I want to develop my heart and soul and whatever it is I need to put into my teaching to make me special and to make me feel good about it. I'm not doing it because someone says I have to on a Friday evening, as Dave said, yeah? That's the idea of that. I mean, this isn't surprising, I suppose, is it? But that's 20th century life, isn't it? I mean, that's Charlie Chaplin. You're old enough to know him. In modern times, that idea of the human being alienation, the cog in the wheel. And he literally becomes one, doesn't he, in the film? Have you seen it? It's caught up in the machinery. But it did make me think, I mean, some of the what we do in the name of teacher development is teachers getting caught up in a machinery. And I think that's what Dorothy was kind of alluding to when she talked about the comfort zone. Getting out of the comfort zone, but into that. Into that. The Friday afternoon, the scheme, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to tick this box, I have to. I mean, that may include bureaucratic duties, especially in state school teachers, but increasingly in lots of schools, teachers complain of doing stuff that isn't really related to teaching. Or at least they don't perceive it. 21st century, as has been commented, is for people. So I think, the 20th century, loosely speaking, was for machines, goods, stuff. We've got all the stuff now. The industry's going, so now it's about people, isn't it? Connecting. Relationships. And the teacher's value now is not in the industrial stuff, because that's all free and you can get it. Stuff. Your value, our value, is how we connect with people. So we need to practice, but we need to be Hannah Mandlikova as well, because otherwise, robots, machine learning, some other kind of stuff is going to be able to fairly accurately replicate us. And what the human beings, our students, will want is to see another human being, and what we will want from ourselves. So we can't concentrate on the stuff, otherwise we'll end up like that. We have to concentrate on the people. And that's what, for me, coaching does. It concentrates on people, not the thing. It's all about the people. And if they don't want to do it, they don't have to. The other thing about a coach is the coach never tells you what to do. The coach just asks you questions, and you decide what you want to do. One size doesn't fit all. Here's one I made up of teacher types. Briefly in your group, decide, where are you on that line? This person's put themselves somewhere on the line. They've decided they're sort of halfway between a teacherpreneur, someone who's self-employed, does lots of different kind of work, and a teacher-ployee, someone who's got a steady job in one institution with a salary. Perhaps they do a bit of both. They've also decided they're a little bit more introvert than extrovert. Do that with for you. Where are you? Okay. You get the idea. You need another 30 seconds, okay. As Chris said, you can email me in the same way and get the slides. So if you like these slides or you want to have more time to do the activities, you can do that. It's just giving you an idea of how, the people in that workshop, 15 or 20 of them, are quite a mixture of people. I'm just kind of fleshing out that idea that one size doesn't fit all, because I think sometimes we say it, but what does that mean? And it's not just about experience. Obviously, that's one element. She's taught for 1 year, he's taught for 10 years. But these are quite fundamental things as well. And they will condition, once you've worked out what you're like or what you think you're like, that will condition the type of activities you pursue. How does an introvert feel about the constant workshops and pair work and buddying up and observation? How does an extrovert feel about reading lots of books for an MA course? Now, we can argue that we need to sort of move around and do all those things, but why does it have to be that way? You can be a great teacher and never talk to another teacher if you don't want to. If you communicate with your students, you have all the data, the raw material you need to be a brilliant teacher. And yet we kind of push collaborative development. Now, it may be good for some people, and it may have a nice warm feeling, and it may stop burnout, but again, leave the people who don't want to join in alone. It's the kind of idea of the Mexican wave, isn't it? Not everyone wants to do that thing. Although they look happy, don't they? There's people in the stadium who are just sitting there going, oh, for goodness sake. And you've got people in your staff rooms, and you may be some of those people. For goodness sake, just leave me alone. another way. I mean, I reckon this is one I came across quite recently. I don't know if you've come across disk profiles. That's the link, but don't worry about the link. You can just actually put disk profile into Google. And it's a little quiz you can do, which will give you a typical reading of 4 personality types. And again, you can do that. You can actually read that now and already decide which one you think you are, or which combination, or which kind of teacher you are, or which kind of student you are. And you can start thinking about the people around you and what they're like. But if you don't believe your own kind of first impression, you can go and do a quiz where you answer 20, 30, 40 questions, and it'll give you a readout at the end, a kind of profile. You're this much of this much of that. And then you kind of disagree with your own profile, or you do it again, or you say this is a load of rubbish, the questions are stupid. You've all done those kind of things, yeah? But I recommend it because the process, even if you don't believe in it, the process gets you thinking. It's like talking about star signs. People go, well, that's a load of rubbish. That's not the point. The point is if you start thinking about what a Gemini is like and whether you are a bit kind of two-faced, then you're kind of thinking about yourself and you're thinking about how you could best develop and what you want to do. And this actually reminded me of what Dorothy was saying about the teachers who are kind of in the comfort zone. Because some of those memes that you put up, which describe the comfort zone, actually were describing the yellow and blue, the CNS, weren't they? So what's been demonized as something that is, not adequate, being in your comfort zone, is not. It shouldn't be demonized. This is supporting that idea, I think, that people are different, and people don't always want to be thinking out of the box, jumping out of the box, etc., etc. Sometimes they have a different style of being. These people can all be good teachers, I think. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. We've had teachers like that, haven't we? It's nice to have a caring, agreeable, supportive teacher, but sometimes that's a bit boring and we like the one who's energetic and outgoing. That may depend on our personality as learners as well. Why is it some teachers seem to click with some classes and not others? It may be to do with more fundamental personality orientations of them and their students. But certainly it helps you choose your development path, I think. Any questions about that? You kind of... yeah, because the four personality types. Yeah, there's dominant. God, I can't forget that. No, God, I can't remember now. God, I'll find out. It's not on that slide. I'll find out later. But anyway, it's the four personality types that describe those.
This isn't only useful for identifying where you might sit, but also if you use it well and begin to work out where other people sit, it can actually be really useful in how you interact with other people. And if there's somebody you haven't been getting along with or can't find a way to work with, then that can help you see why, if you can work out why you are both different and then how to interact with each other.
It's dominance, influence, steadiness, conscientiousness. Steadiness. Conscientiousness.
No, absolutely not. You can be extremely one, extremely another, or a balanced person, like in anything. You don't have to be... Messi's not a good goalkeeper, footballer thing, you know? Maybe Van Lindel couldn't dance, I don't know. It wasn't important for him to be able to dance. It's not important for Theresa May to be able to dance. She tried it, not very good. It's precisely the opposite. Actually, humanity benefits from variety. Diversity is the key. What you do need, as Susan was saying, is, Sarah, sorry, is the balance in the team. What you find is if you've got a load of reds in an office together, you get a kind of war. But if you've got a load of yellows, you don't get anything happening. So this is kind of the metaphor for human kind of success, I think, in the 21st century, as well as in staff rooms and in our teaching. Know yourself. Be aware of what you lack, find people around you who meet those lacks so that you can make a team, or if you're on your own in a moment, you're right, I think, about that, Alan, you've got to sort yourself out. If I'm getting a bus tomorrow, it's no point me saying, oh, well, I'm not very good at timetables, or I'm not very steady, or I'm just all up in the clouds. I've got to actually work it out. You're absolutely right. But as a general rule, I don't have to pursue that too much. I just have to make sure that my students benefit from my presence with them, and playing to your strengths may be a way through. For a teacher, though, of course, they need to be aware of the different types. Absolutely. Yeah. Teachers, yeah, absolutely. Teachers tend to be... Yep. The more you can switch the roles. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. The more you can switch the roles and react, that's good. But I think it's good to know what you're good at and what other people are good at and recognize that. A lot of people complain, well, she's a brilliant teacher, but she never fills in the register. Well, there's the answer to that. Well, yes and no. Yes and no, but it helps you to think about what will get her filling in the register, or whether we do need to fill in the register. But anyway, probably agree, but maybe not. The other reason I think I like a coaching approach, is that this guy's a tennis coach, Timothy Galway. He wrote a book. It was called The Inner Game of Tennis, which is quite well known. Anyone heard of it? Dorothy? It's great. Every question I ask, only one person. There's always one person, but no more. Okay, I'll let you read that, because it's supposed to do. Okay. Well, you don't have to read it, but everyone else does. So. You're reading the third paragraph and you're nodding to yourself, aren't you? You're nodding. That's me, and that's a lot of people I know. Fear, self-doubt, lapses in focus, limiting concepts or assumptions. All of these affect teachers. In fact, this is the starting point for teacher development or professional development, the conversation about those things. Because it may well be that someone is happy in what they're doing and in that moment in their career, but they may be frustrated that they do want to be doing something, but they can't do it. Something's blocking them, just like they can't give up smoking or they can't lose weight or whatever it is they want to do. Learn the guitar. I mean, they've got to... That conversation, I think, is part of professional development, teacher development, and that's a conversation teachers can have with each other. I don't think you need to be a trained coach to have that conversation, or a therapist. Although sometimes the conversation may go in that way and you need to stop it and say, go and see a therapist, perhaps. But that's Kvitova, by the way, I think, isn't it? Yep. We haven't had any drugs or rock and roll. Oh, yeah, we had rock and roll and sex. We haven't had any drugs. That's what Timothy Galway said there. So isn't that kind of really important? Isn't that what teachers should be doing with students, or could be doing with their students, to help them learn English? Ultimately, that's it, isn't it? The students have fears and blockages. They don't practice. They don't come to class. They kind of won't speak. They translate everything into Spanish or Czech. Whatever it is they do, they have this. Why aren't we doing grammar? Whatever it is. So as a teacher, if your job is fundamentally to get that person to learn as much English as possible, then you need to attend to this. And if you're a teacher yourself, or you're working and responsible for teachers in the sense that you're a director of studies, surely that's what you want to do. See if that teacher gets as far as they want, not as far as you want. Respecting their right to say, I'm not interested in your development at all. Because here's the thing, what's wrong with... Teacher says that, and the director of studies, sometimes in my leadership courses, I'm working with directors of studies, say, we've got this teacher, and he's really stubborn, and he won't go to any sessions, and he just won't develop, and he's kind of dragging the atmosphere down. And my question is normally, well, what's his teaching like? And he goes, oh, it's very good. Gets good feedback from the student. Well, so what then? What does it matter? in that sense, I think the development, if you want to go with the route of improving the teacher, then you need to demonstrate to the teacher that they need to improve in a certain way, or respect their right to do a good enough job. Why do they have to be the best teacher they can be? Why can't they just be good enough? What's wrong with that? We're not getting paid a fortune, are we? They're probably way better than the amount they're getting paid would suggest, I think. But there you go. I mean, I think this works if for teachers working independently or in a school. This is kind of written from the point of view, maybe of an organization or the person considering teacher development, things they might consider. And it's not that I'm saying we are not doing that or you're not doing it. I think everyone's doing it up to a point. I'm kind of... Yes? Yeah, it's a good point. It sounds... Yeah. I mean, I would ultimately, what you want, going back to what Chris was talking about, values and ethos, if this cascades, the teachers will do it with each other. This isn't necessarily a top-down enterprise at all. There's nothing wrong with you talking to a fellow teacher, or it doesn't even have to be a teacher, your partner, your friend, a kind of, what do they call them, a critical friend, or someone who's prepared to sit with you and talk about these things. It doesn't have to be concentrated on the director of studies or the manager or that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a human thing. What would you do if your friend was flagging or seemed miserable? Cheer them up. If you've got time, or point that out to someone else. Hey, I notice Marta seems to be kind of not very quiet, and she's normally very and then maybe you don't know Marta very well, but you know someone in the staff room who does. Can you have a word with her or something like that? I don't know. This is about the ethos and the culture of the school. Is there that sense of reciprocal vulnerability? I think was a nice phrase that Chris used. Yes.
Can I just ask, it seems to me there might be some potential conflict between 1 and 6. Say high standards, but surely if it's teacher driven, it's their standard, they've decided.
That's true.
Or is it about nudging them, like challenging them? At what point do we respect their goal? Is nudging them on a liberator?
Yes, you're right. There is a potential conflict, but ultimately, in a coaching philosophy, the coachee, the client, the teacher is always right. And if they want to opt out, they opt out. Now, whether you decide that them opting out means they can't work in your school anymore, that's your decision. That's your ownership. Yeah, that's fine. We don't want teachers like that in this school. You need to find another school which is comfortable with that. And you may want to evaluate other things. Generally in coaching, it tends to work, and as you know with your students, they like to, this is I+1, isn't it? Sorry to bring Krashen up again after last time, or Vygotsky, zone of ZPD. It's the idea that the teachers do respond to challenges. I mean, we had an equals inspection recently. I know some of you have done that, or a British Council inspection, any kind of thing like that. And I think ultimately, although there was an initial kind of fear, ultimately the teachers enjoyed that challenge, that stepping up a little bit, as long as they were supported and felt they could do it. And so there is a role for that, I think. And yeah, I think Chris was calling it a nudge or something like that. But you're right, there could be a conflict. as I say, from a human point of view and from my point of view, there is no place for imposing on another human being those things, but you can make a deal or an ultimatum. That's fine. Your choice is to do this thing, but you'll have to do that thing in another place because we can't have people doing that thing here. No? That's what I mean. So that's tolerated in the what each school does is up to them. If you want to create a school where everyone does 20 hours of CPD on Saturday and Sunday, I mean, fine, do it. There's probably some people out there who are evangelical enough to want to do that. The GROW model you've probably come across, or you might have. It's a very kind of well-known, I think, model for having the conversation. So, Dave, if you do have time to talk to that teacher or any other teacher, or they want to talk to you, or you want to talk to yourself, you can structure the conversation like this, thinking about the goal. So instead of, well, I'm just going to go to that pronunciation workshop that you've put on for me very kindly. What's your goal? I want to improve my teaching of pronunciation. What's the reality? Well, kind of students keep messing up with all this and that, and I'm not sure. I'm kind of drilling them a bit, but I'm not sure they're improving. And what can I do? Options and obstacles, there are several. One might be going to a workshop or doing a course or training or having a mentor or all sorts of things, or reading a book about phonology or looking at YouTube videos or talking to Sinead on Skype because she's an expert on phonology and will turn you round. There's all sorts of ways, and then you can agree a way forward. The idea of the GROW format is it does respect the teacher or the client, the student, and it's driven by them. The solutions can be anything. The solution could be attending a conference or doing a course. It's about the procedure, really. And I don't think you need to be an expert or a professionally trained coach to do it. I mean, for me, you just need to do those things which actually human beings do pretty well now and then. I say now and then. It's probably our greatest weakness, I think, as a species, is listening, well, in terms of communication. So number one, normally, is where it all kind of goes wrong. But that's something we can improve. Like Ivan Lendl improved his backhands, we can improve our listening skills. It's not just she's a good listener. It's not just Chris who's a good listener. Everyone's a good listener. It's just maybe they need to work on it a bit more. Oh. Okay. The mentor has to, a mentor would have to be another teacher. But a coach, you could have a coach who's not a teacher. So the coach is more distant. So a mentor should have leads by example and shows you, whereas the coach will ask you questions. So the coach can be someone who's got nothing to do with teaching, whereas a mentor, I think that's about it, isn't it? Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. But they can only do that if they are the same thing. So if the coach is not a teacher, they can't model teaching. Yeah. But there's some overlap, obviously, I think. These are the kind of things you do. And it starts with listening, and we're kind of not very good at it. Okay. So that's what you would do. I mean, one way you can start is do this activity in a workshop or with teachers, you know? Again, it's not starting with it's let them decide what the thing is, and then do the conversation. Professional development dilemmas. Go through the GROW model, use those 6 kind of rules, and you start kind of having a conversation, and at the end of that conversation, that teacher's going to start feeling a bit better, a bit clearer about it, probably. And I think more motivated if it's coming from them. So it's kind of rewinding a bit, rather than, hey, there's a conference in town, why don't you go? Which is okay, but it's not. Why? It's, again, that thing that Lendl said, it's all activity and no direction. I mean, that's something for you to think about in your own workplace. If you are interested in this, start thinking about, well, who would I actually talk to and when? Of course, there is a danger. If you kind of get into this stuff, then you make a scheme out of it. And you go to everyone, right, we're all going to do coaching now, and we're all going to have meetings, and we're going to cascade, and you're all going to be coaches to each other. And then you actually end up back in the Mexican wave of coaching. So There's a slight kind of irony there, I think. I would just do it with little things, nudging things, you know. How you talk to the other people in your work, people see that, they hear about that, then they want to have that conversation, and it kind of spreads. I don't think it's a scheme. Yeah, I mean what's that in there for? Scary movie. Oh yeah, scary movie is back to the Lendl idea. Just keep practicing and practicing. Fundamentally, the way to become a better teacher is to keep observing yourself over and over and over again. Either video yourself or get someone to observe you or do the thing Chris described. But that kind of is very reductive, but that's the key. If you want to get your backhand better, just hit a lot of backhands, get someone to give you some feedback on where you're going wrong now and then hit tons more backhands. You don't need that much feedback. You can spend an hour hitting backhands and the coach can give you 5 minutes of feedback or demo or whatever it is. Oh, it's moved on. It skipped on. So that's what the scary movie is. And it's a scary movie because teachers don't like that, do they? How many people here have sort of observed themselves or videoed themselves teaching in the last month, the last year? Yeah, so don't do it, do we? But it's weird because if you said to Hannah Mandlikova, you know, have you been on the tennis court this week? I mean, she was at the top of her game. Of course, she'd have said yes. They're on the tennis court every day. Yeah, we're on the tennis court because we're teaching, but if we're not kind of, and we may notice it, we may be very reflective, but there's some things we don't notice. So we need the kind of eyes of the video. And it's scary because we see things on the video we didn't think. And let's be honest, the reflective conversation sometimes works, but anyone who's been in teacher training, some teachers don't do that very well. They just kind of justify themselves. And it's quite clear listening to them that they haven't really learned anything from reflection. Reflection isn't a given. It's actually quite difficult to do. And it would be much quicker if you just told them, which people do on CELTA courses. But later on, it's, oh no, this is developmental. No, just tell them. Point being is if you're a teacher doing something, you can't see yourself. You haven't got eyes in the back of your head, or up there, or here, or ears that you have. So people need that feedback. You just have to find a nice human relationship where they will accept or invite you to give them. Come and see my lesson and tell me what you think of my pronunciation teaching, or what, you know, do you think it's effective? What did you notice the students doing? Yeah, that kind of stuff. I think we'll get really good. If you want to get good at teaching, that's what I would do. It's too late for me now. Just wasted my life, but there you go. I can't. I've still got time, I guess. Yeah, you can use frameworks. I mean, Chris mentioned these to measure yourself, or you can do a course to measure yourself. We're not going to talk about that. And this sort of is consistent, I think, with a coaching approach. At a beginning, you know, what does it look like if you're in a school, or even not in a school? You know, here's 10 things you could do, or some suggestions. Choose one of them, or two. Maybe then have the grow conversation with your partner about it. And then you can make a little plan to do it. Then you can start doing what they call PDPs, professional development plans, is it? Yeah. You go, well, those are the things I'm going to do. And you can note to self, and I think, again, Chris was talking about that as part of, I think that's consistent with a coaching approach if it's, you set micro goals. But you have to have the big conversation first. Why are you doing these things? If you start with goals, it's not enough. But that could emerge, and I think if that emerged, that could be then evidence to an inspecting body or to a school or a structure that things are going on. That's a way of, it doesn't have to be counting the number of hours people have attended sessions. That's it, really. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We didn't have the drugs. We had the rock and roll, and we kind of had sex, but it was Ivan Lendl, so it didn't really count. But there's still time. We've got the panel discussion. As I said before, if you've got, I'll tie up now because I think it's past, isn't it? Yeah, it is exactly past. If you've got any more questions about this or anything else, we've got the time in the panel discussion, haven't we? My email address is there, so you can jot that down. If you want this presentation, just email me and I will send it to you. Okay? Thank you very much.